with the Wicked Queer Festival. Wait a second. What was that? Machine said something.
It said it's being recorded or something.
Oh, okay, great. Which is intentional. We wanted that.
Definitely.
All right, so I will start again. Um, my name is Diane Griffin. I am a programmer with the Wicked Queer Film Festival. We are here talking to one of the filmmakers from the Trans Shorts Program #1, Wadi. I'm not sure I'm accenting the right syllable there. Apologize if not.
That was fun.
Okay, good. And we wanted to spend some time and talk about her wonderful film, her, his, their.
Yeah, so the pronouns are he, him.
Already, I'm shooting myself in the foot already. Anyway.
That's fine.
Well, let's start. What are your preferred pronouns?
My pronouns are he, him.
Okay, thank you. So anyway, I just wanted to start by complimenting you on your gorgeous film. I just think it's the most conceptual thing that was in this program. One of the most conceptual things I've shown. I love the play on binary and non-binary. One of the things that I found really interesting was the way that natural and environmental things get pulled into this kind of design space and manipulated. There was a scene early on where you're filming cars, and then you go to the design space and you use the car sounds as soundtrack for some manipulations. I heard the turn signal, which was a really good choice, and the window going up and down, and all of that was really interesting to me. So yeah, there's stuff like that all through the film. Can you talk a little bit about your process in relation to that, what you were thinking?
I mean, I think that was the initial challenge, because before starting to film, whatever you saw on screen, I was trying to write a paper, try to put my ideas and turn them into something that's concrete. And so I had advisors that were trying to understand what I was doing, and I didn't even know what I was doing. So I think that already was clashing. But the minute I knew that it wasn't going to be one thing that I need to film, it wasn't going to be one story, one narrative, I just needed to combine all of these audiovisual things that I experience every single day, and that I can probably not even think about them, but they're just so present. Just like you mentioned, these small sounds left and right from the city, inside your house, inside your space. And then, these different elements in the beginning of the film, the keys in the wallets, just any object that I carry with myself and that I carry throughout the day. I think my goal was to really combine all of them together. So I think that I used whatever skill I had at the time to make that combination and talk about how all of these things are actually gendered. Even sound is gendered. You can get triggered by anything in the city that I live in, and I think even in other places, and it will trigger something in your performativity.
Cool. So I guess the logical extension of that is, can you talk about the genesis of the idea of this film? I'm kind of thinking about the story that is in your the film's kind of director statement or whatever.
Right. Yeah. Can you repeat the question, please?
Can you tell the story that you tell that kind of was the inspiration for the film?
The inspiration for the film.
The electronic shop.
Right. Oh, I wanted to ask actually, because I didn't know that statement was put somewhere, so I felt like it was kind of kept in the draft.
Yeah, it's not out for the public.
So that's what you meant. I was thinking about the plot.
That's so cool.
Okay, that was the first thing that I wrote before, before even thinking about the film itself, before knowing it's going to be what it is. And I just needed to remember that. I think that moment just marked a lot of things in me, because I tend to feel safe in place. Unfortunately, and this is something that I had to unlearn much later, is that I would feel safe in spaces that are gentrified in my city. And so it would be hard or super rare for me to take a walk behind my building, where it's not gentrified. Unfortunately, it's an area that the government couldn't care less about. So you feel like you don't belong there because there's just yeah.
Right.
So that moment that I describe in the text, where it's just really late at night, and I'm going, and I feel like I'm trespassing, and I'm acting as a dude because it has to be an act, and no one else will see it differently. I just think that in itself showed me that every space I'm gonna have access to is gendered, and you can't tell me otherwise. People tend to think that it's in the little things, it's in the way you dress, it's which bathroom you go to. But for me, it was really every single conversation, every person you meet, wherever you are, the politics in a certain space. And so that's something that I needed to highlight. Yeah, and that I could exist as a man or woman or anything else in a space that is not necessarily gentrified, that my gender can be recognized and expressed and performed wherever I am. I just need to understand my tools. And yeah.
Was that like one of the first times that you'd been in that kind of situation where you were perceived as a particular gender, as that particular gender?
I think I have been in a situation that was similar, be it alone or, in a cab or at a restaurant with family members. But I think it was always an unsafe setting. So I would feel threatened when it would happen. And so I would either deny it, I would find a way out of it. I wouldn't allow myself to really embrace what's happening and go with the conversation. I think that was the only moment where I was alone, and I knew this was happening, and I was gonna go with it, and I felt safe. Embracing. I felt safer, being the gender that they perceive me as,
Right.
instead of something else. In other situations, it'd be the other way around. So I think that's when
That
it
is
shifted.
interesting, yeah, because the first there's still there's a kind of an excitement to it. When I've had those experiences, like especially early on, it's like, oh, I'm being recognized. It's not
Right.
like, it's like the opposite of like being in disguise. It's
Exactly.
it's really affirming, and there's still
It is.
a little kind of
You're
edge to it.
trespassing somewhere, you're
Yeah.
excited about it. There's this adrenaline rush to it.
Mhm.
For sure.
Oh, it's yeah,
Yeah.
very relatable. I can see that it's like there in the film in a lot of different um, ways. Like that moment gets kind of talked about, like the last line of text in the movie. You will not notice that I am not veiled, which like has like
Hmm.
so many meanings. It's not just like because of like the specific place that it's in. you know,
Right.
oh, but it's like liberation, right?
That scene was challenging, I think, because I wanted to put that scene. I really, I knew I wanted it, but I didn't know how, and if I was gonna be the one to film it. Initially, I was gonna enter a mosque wearing a security camera, not a security camera, sorry, like a like a hidden camera, just like I did in the nightclub scene,
Mhm.
thinking I would be able to enter the space and just pass, and I'd be allowed as a man without having to wear a veil, because in mosques if you pass as a woman, you need to wear a veil. So, and I was born and raised in a Muslim family, you know, who still practices their faith, but I completely went, you know, dissociated from that for so long. And most of the, like, the reason behind that was because I felt like it was incongruent with just my beliefs in general, and, you know, that my understanding of the self. But just much later, when I, you know, started seeing myself in my own father, you know, in my own culture, which actually goes back to the name when you asked me about my name, you know, all of these things, me, you know, exploring my gender allowed me to even get closer to these things that I so strongly denied for so long. So the mosque was something that I wanted to see if it would work, but last minute, for, you know, lots of security reasons, I couldn't, you know, it couldn't be me who filmed that shot, which
Right.
was, which could be, you know, an interesting open end to the conversation where, you know, did you actually film it? Were you there? Were you not?
Right. I think within the context of the film, the idea is like I took it as you were there, but I also took it as like I would be there because like I'm looking,
Mm,
you know. So I don't think it necessarily had to like physically reality wise be
right.
about you being there. I'm just gonna make a note here. I have a next question, but if
Yeah.
anyone else has questions, can you maybe type them in the chat? I think you're not muted. We're muting mostly, but just for the sake of things, if you have a question, like at least say you have a question so that we know, and then you can probably ask your own question. But anyway, I think that the next logical thing for me was to ask, um, what is the trans experience like in Beirut?
Big question. Yeah, I think I would have had an answer to that maybe 2 or 3 years ago, when I had just discovered my community, or maybe a bit earlier than that, but um, it felt like I could answer to that question in one sentence and just tell you, you know, that's what it is. You know, you'll find this and this person, they're both trans, and this is where we go. But it's so much bigger than that, and um, there's a lot that I don't even know about. But, you know, I was grateful to meet lots of trans people with different trans experiences. And in Lebanon, we're, you know, super split up in so many different ways. And the class, you know, difference is huge. So you're gonna find queer individuals coming from so many different backgrounds, and Lebanon is tiny. So I don't know. I don't know what's it like being trans in Lebanon. Um, Funnily enough, it's legal.
Oh, well, that's great. Awesome.
It's legal, you know, by the law, but of course, socially, we're still a long way to go.
Hmm.
Um, I think before even talking about trans, or I think just the binary needs to be deconstructed to begin with. The binary on so many different levels. You know, we need to start talking about women before talking about, you know, there's just so much. But the conversation is happening. You know, I'm thankful for that, and I'm thankful to be a part of that conversation. Um, and yeah,
Yeah,
it's
in a
just
big
it's
way.
yeah.
Yeah, no, that your film. It's like I was looking at the credits. It's been shown 4 different times as of last, like when you last
Hmm.
year when you entered it in our festival for consideration. So it's definitely part of the conversation. People have taken notice, right?
Right, and to answer that as well, is that it was funny because if I would screen it in different parts of Lebanon, you know, if I'm just outside of the city, like an hour away, or just in the city but a different place, you're gonna get different reactions. You know, I got a very different reaction when I was screening it in my private American university. You know, with people who knew I was queer for 4 years before presenting my film. You know, and then there was like a completely new audience and then like a gentrified coffee shop, and then there was a completely new audience, you know, 2 hours outside of Beirut, you know, which is the hub. And every time, every time people, you know, maybe would understand a few things, but I think we're just at the beginning. We're just at the beginning.
Let's see. Has anybody else got anything that they're wanting to know? Oh, here's okay. In the beginning of your film, you make a collage to create your own terminology.
Of who you are, right?
Yeah. Can you talk about
Is
that?
getting more adopted.
Yeah. Do you feel like this terminology is getting more adopted is the rest of the question. Thanks, Giuseppe. Oh, it's Grace. Oh, sorry.
Hello, Grace. If I understood that correctly, maybe you're referring to there's the stop motion of the different objects, and then I'm kind of giving captions to each of these elements, including the binder. And yes, this terminology is actually being adopted. You know, I do use these words myself, and I've been hearing them way more often, especially that in the Arabic language, it's so hard to talk about your queer experience. You know, just the start of the film just tells you how every single word is gendered. So that's another question. But no, I've met so many people who are now, you know, studying linguistics and actually adding to the dictionary, to the Arabic
Well, that's great.
language.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's super cool. And you notice how people are creating these words, you know, from they're just creating them, and they're being so easily adopted. And I think that's beautiful. You know, they're not only transliterated, they're also just like different sounds that you are familiar, that are familiar to you, and that, you know, resonate with you. Resonate.
Mm-hmm.
Another question.
Yeah.
Arabic designers. Yes.
Yeah, Maria asks, first I wanted to really say I like your film. I have a couple of questions. Which concept was harder for you to materialize via film? Yeah, what thing that you wanted to say, I guess, is like was hardest to like make sure was in the film?
I think on the top of my head, I'd say just to make sure that throughout the film, there's this constant element of being watched, being observed. And I think there's that scene where I was actually driving, and I had to hold up a camera to catch people staring at me, which is something that happens often. And directly right after that, catch a security camera. And you know, if I take a picture of just like a pole with different security cameras, people can look at you funny. So I think these two scenes, these two shots back to back, especially, you know, waiting for a man to really look at you, I think that was scary. And also working with that footage wasn't so comfortable, just, you know, making those images come together, and also keeping that feel throughout, because I didn't want it to be an unwelcoming experience to the audience. But I also wanted this eerie thing that, you know, it's going to be pleasant, but you're always going to, like, the sound's going to cut back to you're being watched, you know, someone's watching you. And there's this idea. Yeah. So I hope this answers your question. Okay.
Yeah, and then her second question was, the film grow with you? How do you view it today?
That is a good question. That is a good question, because I think the last people who watched this film were my grandparents, probably 3 weeks ago, 2 or 3 weeks ago. And that's something that I never would have thought would happen. Just like not even a possibility. But I think it grew with me because it was just kind of like a diary that I was walking around with, one. And two, you know, it's called Ladies, Gentlemen, and Everyone in Between. And the purpose of it is to see how the city, you know, reacts to me, how I react to the city. And it just allowed me to have, you know, more understanding of my own gender and how I like to be perceived, how I like to perform, and that it's not so scary, you know, if you just have the tools for it. So it really allowed me to move in space
Yeah.
much better, you
It's
know.
like, it feels like we referred to this earlier, like the idea of language. You know, if you have a language for something, you can
100%. I
contain
mean,
it.
that's what it is. That's what it is. It's just an extra tool, you know, that you know how to use.
Mhm.
So that's really what it was for me with that film. And then it's also a conversation starter for people that I'm, you know, slowly coming out to, and people who are very and or only familiar with the Arabic language, or family members who you know, don't have easy access to all this information like I did.
Mhm.
So I think it's important to, you know, turn these conversations in different languages, and I think this film allowed me to do that for sure.
Great. And Noor once says, "Hi, everyone. Jad, do you think this film helped make Arabic language and culture more approachable to you, and maybe other queer friends who you felt could have been distant from Arabic?"
uh, cool. Do you think this film helped make Arabic language and culture more approachable to you? I think so. Like most definitely. Again, I mean, it's been a year that I made this film, and you know, just now am I, you know, really realizing what it means to be Arab, and you know, wanting to, you know, take back this Arabic name that was given to me, um, and wanting to understand queer Arab queer history, and realizing that I don't feel represented worldwide yet, and you know, realizing that there's so much that we're missing out on. So this film, hopefully it did. You know, you'll
Yeah.
tell me. I hope that this film did do that. I think it's just a start. Hopefully I'll be creating more things. And when you were asking about my queer friends, um, I was lucky to screen this, you know, amongst friends at an NGO, and I think they're all queer there, and I've shown this to so many queer friends, and I think it's it's shared experience for sure. I've met other trans guys after this film, for example. I actually landed a job. Now that I remember, I landed a job with like super cool two trans guys who watched my film at one of my screenings.
Mhm.
Um, so I think it allowed to create more. Like from this film, you know, more people saw it. I felt more seen, you know, I put myself out there. I felt more vocal about it, and I suddenly felt like I had a voice in all of this, and I got more privilege with that. So I just wanted to be louder and louder, and now I'm just unstoppable. Just I just want to talk more and create more. I just don't know, you know. So yeah, it's pretty cool. Yeah.
Great. Are you working on another project?
um, Currently I'm, you know, employed with different people. I'm not working on my own things, but it's really funny because, and maybe it is actually after this film, um, everyone that I'm working with, be it freelance or full-time, all of my projects are queer related, everything. And
Mhm.
so I've been working on you know, animated shorts that are all in Arabic, that are talking about different topics, different themes of queer identities in
Wow.
Lebanon or in the Arab world. And so that's super exciting. We also created a glossary with like different terminology and definitions and pronouns, and how you can, you know, easily access those.
Mhm.
And you know, most of our target audiences are like teenagers or people who don't necessarily have access to this information on the internet because it's not available in Arabic.
Yeah.
So it's definitely, yeah, those are my projects, just not something on my own or not a film yet. Hopefully
Wow.
another time.
Sounds like you're really jamming the culture, you know, trying to
I
like really
know it messes
getting
with
out
you,
there and
you
adding to things, right?
know. Yeah, I think uh, it's what I need to do. There's another one. If you're comfortable discussing this, Was the mosque scene intended to be reconciled? Are you closer to your faith now as a trans guy? Yes and no. Yes and no. Um, I think what was beautiful after the film and also after this conversation, the conversation kept on happening. I met lots of trans folks that were Muslim, and I felt that was beautiful because that's never something that I saw, and they're, you know, visible online or around me. So that was great to see. I don't see myself in Islam necessarily. It is definitely something that's a part of, it turned more into my culture. It's something that I grew up with and that I'm, you know, close to, and reminds me of my family, and it's probably a tradition that I will keep, you know, with different events, but it's not something that I carry with me on a daily, no. But that scene was, I think, I'm sorry if I'm saying it wrong, reconciliatory. I
Reconciliate.
think that one. I think it was just because the initial target audience for my film were both of my parents, who are, you know, very close to their faith. So I think I wanted to kind of provoke them there or see what it would do.
Yeah, and that's really great. I think that like I just want to say that the thing that really knocked me out at the beginning when I first saw the film was just um, the design of it, the way it looked, like the scenes where you like have the the nightclub in red, framed in the black, which I felt like was kind of like, I kind of thought of it as the library, the laboratory where your design studio or whatever,
Right.
and you know, and how that was a juxtaposition of you know, real world, but under control and not controlled, but you know, the binary goes so many different directions, and that seems really intentional and really, you know, intentional but allowed to just happen at the same time. And the way that you used design and
Mm.
everything to help tell your story, I was, you know, there was, and just on an aesthetic level, I just thought it was beautiful. It just
I
looked
really
really
appreciate
pretty.
that, Diane. Thank you.
Yeah.
For the design part, I think it's just funny because in the end, I'm like, you know, it's ironic because you're gonna question my gender because, you know, because of the way I dress or because of the way that I walk in my city. But then I was like, yeah, but I'm also a designer, so I'm also gonna like design an ID card. I'm also gonna like really mess with you and like take everything that I can to like you know, collage these two concepts together. And yeah, like you said, that example of the nightclub scene, that was specific scene was just again like transitional, pun intended,
Right.
because like you're kind of going from the space where, you know, they're gonna check for your ID and it's super, you know, there's all these bars to block you out, and then there's like this elevator, it's super eerie, it's kind of slowing down, and then you kind of like go, but you're still being watched. I don't know, it's just this transition from, you know, being on the street to being in the club where it's just dark, and that's where I say all these labels at the end.
Right. And then like, you know, it occurs to me that like nightclubs are often like very designed spaces, or at least somewhat deliberate spaces
Mm-hmm.
too, which was like a nice juxtaposition. They're all through this thing, which is like part of what kills
Yeah,
about it. Um, so
exactly.
does anybody else have anything that they want to ask? And also, while they're thinking, if they can come up with something, do you have anything that you would like to say that hasn't been said?
Um, Maybe you can answer that actually, because one of the things that I was most curious about when I, you know, delivered the film is that the hardest part also was to translate it or to add subtitles to it
Mhm.
because of its nature, and you know, everything is so heavily gendered. So I was confused as to how is this going to work? How are people going to you know, react to this? So if they don't understand Arabic, so um, that's maybe a question that I have, or something that I'm curious in knowing, if language is a barrier or if it's kind of removing from the essence of the film. I don't know. That's just a thought that's there.
Well, it's just my opinion. Now, all I can offer is my opinion. I didn't, I don't have any Arabic. I don't know anything about the
Right.
language. But I can say that I thought it was graphically, aesthetically beautiful
Okay.
in the film, the way you used it. And it was very pleasing. I was glad it was there, and it made, and it even though I didn't understand those words, I felt like with
Right.
the subtitles, I kind of had a clue as to what was being said, but the Arabic itself was just like this beautiful flow, and especially in a film where
Okay.
there's a lot of hard edges and angles, but it's like the language is so, you know, swoopy
Okay.
kind of.
No, it's
Like,
cool. It's cool to know, it's kind
yeah.
of part, it was a protagonist on its own, it
Hmm.
was just part of it.
Absolutely.
Oh, more questions. I think a lot of people who are familiar with Spanish or French and other languages that inherently gender objects can understand conceptually. Okay. Okay. Yeah. I mean, I speak French too, and that is correct. To some extent. I feel like Arabic, for some reason, is way more gendered, but I see it.
Mhm.
Hello, everyone. If you make a part two of film, would change about the way you view the process? If I would make a part two, maybe that part two wouldn't be, a direct continuation of that film. Maybe it would be another take on gender, another story, another exploration of it. Um, what would I change about the way you view the process and meaning of the film? I wouldn't worry too much about my audience anymore. I think that's one of the things that was worrying me the most about, its creation in general. There was this constant fear of who's watching, who's going to watch this, who's going to react, what does that mean about my work, about, me in general. But I think now I want to be more vocal about it. I don't have this barrier of, who's watching. Um, and I think it would be maybe more radical, if that makes sense. Uh, but yeah, I think but I'm still curious in using these different tools, be it sound, video, different forms of animation, uh, just to expand on that. Yeah,
Well, if you do another project sometime soon, please send it to us.
you got it.
Yes, I was so happy to see this one, and yeah, I think you're a voice that we need, and I think you're already contributing clearly, and thank you so much for your film.
Thank you, Diane. Thank you, everyone. Really means a lot to me. I'm super, super humbled, and it was a great experience overall. Awesome.
Well, thank you. All right,
Thank
so
you.
thanks everyone, and if there's nothing else that must be said, I think we can
We
we
can
can
wrap it up.
we can wrap it up. All right.
Thanks, guys,
Thanks,
everyone,
Jen.
for watching and voting if you did. Um, and hopefully, I'll see you at the next edition of Wicked Queer. When is that?
We're tentatively shooting for an actual live one in
Okay.
April. That's our usual time. We usually do them in
Okay.
April. We'll see how the world
Okay.
goes between now and then.
You'll see me in 5 years then. Okay.
All right then.
See you, Diane. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks, Shisab.